Hi, I'm Sam Flynn, digital wellbeing coach, trainer, and speaker. And today I thought I would talk about how to reduce your teenagers' smartphone use. So I'm recording this just before we go into the throes of Christmas. And that's what really triggered this video for me because Christmas is such a family time, isn't it? It's a time to be together as a family, to switch off from work and school and everything else that goes on the rest of the year and just enjoy some time together. And I know for many people or for many families, there's going to be something that gets in the way of that. And that is smartphones. If you have teenagers or just children who are old enough to own smartphones, then you might already be thinking about what Christmas is actually going to be, which is them on their phone all the time. Smartphone addiction amongst teenagers is definitely a real and growing problem. I am kind of in that kind of in-between age where I got my first phone, where it was just like text and calls, when I was 16. So I really spent the majority of my teenage years without a phone, definitely without a smartphone. They did not exist back then. And so I can definitely appreciate how brilliant it was to be a teenager in that time where you would have to pick up the landline to call your mates or just go and knock on for them. You won't get caught up in social media and everything else that comes with having a smartphone. So, how can you help your teenager to reduce their smartphone use? Well, I think the first thing to note is if you are the parent of a teenager, thankfully I am not yet, my eldest is 9. But as a mum of 3 girls, I know I'm going to have 3 teenage girls at, some point in the not too distant future. And I know it isn't easy. We've all been teenagers, haven't we? We've all caused our parents trouble and strife through our teenage years. So it's not as simple as just saying to them, get off your phone. And I'm sure as a parent of a teenager, you know that. So it isn't just a case of, well, I'll just discipline them and say, you're not allowed on your phone, and that's the end of it. Because, of course, teenagers do rebel and resent and do anything they can to break those rules. So instead, it's really working with them to help reduce their use and help them get more from life than just staring at their phone. So here's some ways that I think can really help with that. Number 1 is to really lead by example. So rather than it being one rule for your teenager and another rule for you, everyone who owns a smartphone in the house should stick to the same rules. So, if you find yourself picking up your phone while your teenager's trying to talk to you, then how can you expect them not to do the same to you? If you find yourself taking your phone to bed and scrolling in bed for hours before you fall asleep, how can you expect your teenager to do any different? So it's really important that you lead by example. And actually, if you do find you use your smartphone more than you'd like, then maybe you want to look at my short course, Reduce Your Phone Use, which will help you reduce your own phone use, which will really help you then be a role model to your children. So that is definitely the point. The first point has to be you need to lead by example. So a lot of the other things I'm going to talk about today are things that you should also be doing to make sure that you are leading by example and paving the way for your child and their smartphone use. The second thing then is to educate them. So this isn't a, right, sit down, I want to talk to you all about how awful smartphones are. It's doing it in more subtle ways, really, and saying like, oh, I read an article the other day. Did you know that smartphone use can really negatively impact mental health? Do you see that in any of your friends who might use their phone too much? What do you think? And engage in conversation about it. Because I think while we are constantly with our phones in our hands, we don't really think about actually the impact it's having on us with our mental health, with our sleep, with our ability to focus and pay attention. So if you can spark discussion with your teenager about that, and have just a discussion with them, not a lecture, not a here's why I don't want you to use your smartphone because did you know it can impact mental health, but actually have a two-way discussion with them and ask them their thoughts on it, and is it something that they see as a teenager, and what do they think, and really engage in that discussion with them, because often when we really acknowledge the impact is when we start to think maybe actually I don't want to use it quite as much. So that education piece is really important, but as I say, doing it in a way that's not having them sit down, I need to talk to you, this is a serious matter, I want to tell you all about why smartphones are horrific. Not like that at all. Just engage them in discussion and talk through the impact that smartphones might be having on them and their friends. Number 3 is to engage them in other activities that they find fun. So this isn't like put your phone down and do the hoovering, put your phone down and do the washing up. We all pick up our phones because we're bored. That's one of the primary reasons we pick up our phones, because we're bored or we're procrastinating. So if we're doing something fun, we are less likely to pick up our phone. So engage them in something fun. It could be a family board game or some kind of daft game, where you end up being embarrassed as the parent. So something that you do together as a family. It could be, maybe asking them to nip to the shops for you, or getting them out of the house, or, anything that kind of distracts them from wanting to reach for their phone. And the more you do this, the more it breaks down the habit. Now, I crochet as my anti-phone activity. If I'm crocheting and using my hands, I'm not going to be picking up my phone. Now, I acknowledge that a lot of teenagers aren't going to want to crochet, but maybe you could say, hey, let's learn this skill together and find something that you could maybe do together or that they could engage in. So having your hands busy, doing something else that feels more fulfilling as well and feels fun instead of looking at their phone can be a really good way of slowly breaking down that habit. Number 4 is to have no phone zones in the house. So that might be, for example, at the dinner table. No phones are allowed at the dinner table, including adults. As I said before, at the first point I made, you need to lead by example with this, and any rules you set for smartphone use, you need to adhere to as well. So no phones at the dinner table, no phones allowed in the toilet. You can use the excuse so if you don't want them to drop it down the toilet or anything like that, but no phones in bathrooms, in toilets is a really good one. Otherwise you might find them spending ages in there because they're scrolling on their phone. I definitely know a few people have a no phones upstairs rule or no phones in bedrooms rule, which I think is a really powerful one, because if they're not able to go on their phone in their bedroom, they're not going to be caught hours scrolling because you're going to be around them and seeing them. Whereas if they're allowed their phone in the bedroom, they're going to be there for hours and hours and hours scrolling. Again, though, that means you're not allowed your phone in your bedroom. So having no phone zones in your house that you all stick to, and again, this is where the education comes in. Why are we doing this? Because, well, we know phones have this impact, rather than just, hey, listen, that's it, we're not allowed any phones here, there or everywhere. Don't be too authoritarian in this, be more consultative in it and discuss it and make it kind of, these are the reasons why this might be a really valuable thing for us to do. On that note, number 5, how about having a charging zone, somewhere where all the phones get charged, maybe on the side in the kitchen, for example. So when you don't allow phones to be charged in the bedroom, that means that phones are rare, are less in the bedroom at night. We all charge our phone overnight, don't we? It's the typical place we go to charge our phones. We scroll, plug our charger in and go to sleep. But having your charger somewhere else means you're less likely to scroll in bed, and neither is your teenager. So having a charging zone in the house, having somewhere like a kitchen worktop or somewhere like that, all the phones are charged there, and maybe all at the same time as well. So they're all there at night, out of the way, where you're not going to end up being caught in the scroll. Number 6 is also having a sort of time boundary on this as well. So it could be that after 9 p.m, no phones, and maybe you could make it a bit later at the weekend, but kind of a time where it cuts off. There's no phones after 9 o'clock, or your phone must be on charge or in the charging zone from 9 o'clock every night. And again, everyone sticks to that rule. Number 7 is to have phone-free days as a family. This is a lot easier if you're going out and about rather than being sat at home. So maybe you go out for a whole day and you all agree, we're not going to take our phones, or maybe we'll just take one phone that stays tucked away in a bag in case there's an emergency. But other than that, there is no phone use during this day out. We're not taking our phones with us, we're leaving them at home. We can pick them back up when we get home, but let's have a few hours out without our phones. Another good rule to have in place for everyone is one screen at a time. So if you're watching TV, you're not scrolling on your phone at the same time. Or if you're watching a movie, you're not scrolling on your phone at the same time. Or if you're doing your homework on a computer, you're not scrolling on your phone at the same time. So having a household rule of one screen at a time is another really good way of doing it. Because how many of us get caught sat on the sofa scrolling away? If you have that as a house rule, it's going to trigger you all to actually engage with what you're watching, or realise maybe I don't want to watch this, maybe I do want to go and scroll on my phone, and then I'm going to go and sit at the kitchen table or somewhere external so I'm not looking at 2 screens at once. Number 9 is to have a do this first rule. And again, this also applies to adults. So, for example, Once you've done your homework, then you can have your phone, So homework first, phone second, or chores first, phone second. I mean, I do this anyway in my working day, I will avoid looking at my phone until I've done as much as I need to in my work to go, right, okay, I'm okay now. I can have a quick look at my phone, see if I've missed anything. But it does make a huge difference for productivity and also reducing the amount you're sitting and looking at your phone. And then finally, number 10 is to run a competition in the household. Households, families are always quite competitive with one another. So could you have a competition to reduce your screen time? You all write down what your screen time is, and then the person who's reduced it by the biggest percentage wins some kind of prize at the end of the week. And every week you do that. Every week you look at, okay, who's won it this week? Who's won the screen time competition? Because teenagers are competitive, especially if you all say put in a £5 each. They don't want to lose the money, and they definitely want to gain some money. So that can have a really powerful impact if you set a competition for who can reduce their screen time the most. And initially I would keep the periods of time quite short, like a week, but eventually you might go, okay, let's move it to a month now, because if we keep doing it every week, we're going to get to a point where we have 0 screen time, which might not be a bad thing, but to make it, a more viable competition, start with a week and then maybe move to every month you run this competition as to who can reduce their screen time the most, because competitiveness makes a big difference in families. So I hope that's been useful and giving you some really solid ideas for how you can help your teenager reduce their screen time and encourage them rather than just disciplining and shouting at them and telling them they must. And of course, as the direct impact of that is it's going to help you reduce your screen time as well. So thank you for watching. I would love it if you would comment below and let me know if these tips have been useful for you. Also make sure you subscribe to my channel, as I'll be sharing lots more videos about digital well-being and managing your relationship with the digital world and technology. Take care.